part of Locked On Sports Atlanta on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Hawks postcast, your home for the best Atlanta Hawks talk. It's local insight you can't get anywhere but right here at Locked On. I'm your host, Tenitra. Batiste. Alongside me is DeShaun Tate. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And of course, the Locked On Hawks postcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So the Hawks are 2-0 after their 125-120 win over the Charlotte Hornets tonight. But why couldn't they just put the pesky Hornets away? We'll talk about that, and we'll get right into it with Tate's and T's takes. So your take tonight was, regardless of how it ended, and it was the slow-mo of a life. It was like the last 6.7 seconds lasted about 20 minutes. But ultimately, the Hawks were still victorious, and you said they did what you expected them to do.
Yeah, I have this, Tenitra, I have this, I guess, just this narrative about teams just doing what you're expected to do. When you just typically think about the Atlanta Hawks and the two teams that they've played already so far this regular season, you typically think the Atlanta Hawks are going to win. Why? Because they're just typically the better team. Do what you're supposed to do. Beat the teams you're supposed to beat, and just at least be competitive against the teams that are either equal to you or better than you, even if we have to be okay with the fact that that is going to result in a loss sometimes. They've done at least that much so far. Especially the reason I felt this way about tonight's game is not only because I believe over the course of the last two regular seasons, 4 times that Charlotte meets up with the Hawks, I think Charlotte has won 6 of those 8 last 8 games.
Yep.
Something that is extremely unacceptable. I feel like you have to, at some point, have some kind of pride. Don't overanalyze it. Just go out there and win. Plain and simple. Simple and plain. This clearly has been a team that has your number. And it seems like it's become kind of mental to some degree or whatever.
Yeah.
Not totally in love with the way that this game was officiated, if I'm being honest. I think that's why the game was extended out as long as it was. I don't like a lot of the calls for either of the teams, if I'm just being honest. The Hawks prevail. And again, like I said the other night, they're able to say that they're doing something that not a lot of all the other teams are doing, and they are still undefeated.
Yeah. Yeah. And when I think about getting what I expected, I don't know that I expected anything, because they have had so much trouble with the Charlotte Hornets. It doesn't matter who's in the lineup. LaMelo Ball was there tonight, but many of those games that the Charlotte Hornets won, he wasn't there. Brandon Miller wasn't there tonight, but there were games that he wasn't there. Charlotte still won. So for me, I really didn't know what to expect, except to expect, okay, does this team still have the Hawks number? So that's kind of what I came into the game expecting was, and they have their number particularly well on the Hawks home court. So
Yes,
I guess for me, so I guess for me, I was just kind of looking to see, okay, is tonight going to be any different? And I tell you, it was a scary sight for the vast majority of this game, except for that first quarter, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But it's 15-point lead, you get it down to a tie game in the fourth quarter. Like that for me was troubling. So I don't really know, but I guess what I expected was not to be shocked if the Hawks lost. So I will say I am pleasantly pleased that they actually walked away with a W.
You know, the crazy part is, that I'm not really thrilled with, and this kind of goes back to you talking about, not seeing something that what did you start off with?
Oh yeah. Not seeing something. And we were talking about it pre-show, just wanting something different. And we'll talk about it a little bit later on Sunday with what we saw tonight. Not wanting to see that again Sunday.
Yeah. Between the two guys being LaMelo Ball and then last night being Cam Thomas, 2 guys I think combining for about 70 points. And I get it, offensive firepower, probably 2 of the, amongst some of the best scorers in this league, who's not amongst the elite of scorers in this league. Superstar status players. These guys are more like second, probably more like third tier players, young guys. I didn't really expect to see 70 hung, especially from a team that made all the moves that they have made, like I talked about the other night, to improve as much as they wanted to defensively.
Mhm.
But I think something else that helped, Charlotte in this game was just rebounding. And that's something that's always going to keep you in the game, especially on the offensive end. That helped them out a lot. And the Hawks obviously closed that down quite a bit as we got closer to the end of the game. But speaking of rebounding, I think that is where the Hawks had realized they had to also step it up quite a bit. And, 4 out of the 5 starters, the one exception being Dyson Daniels, all of them had 7 or more rebounds. So I think that's something that ultimately helped this team get over the hump.
And I'll talk about the rebounds, but I'll talk about them in reverse because I'm not pleased at how they played the boards tonight, especially allowing for so many second chance points. But we'll hold our mule on that one until later in the show because we're going to talk about the things we do not want to see come Sunday against that Oklahoma City Thunder team. Now, for me, my take tonight was that I really liked the first quarter of the game. I felt like that was really good ball movement. That was something that I wanted to see. Also, we saw Quinn Snyder actually try a 3-guard lineup, and it worked pretty well for the most part. So I really like being able to see that. And I will say, in that first quarter, I felt like there was a slight uptick in defense. It didn't necessarily yield rebounds, but it did yield some things for me, and that is effort. I just always want to see more effort from this team defensively. And I felt like, okay, I see a little something. And like I said, with the ball movement, and I know we'll talk about Trey in a little bit, but I thought that the first quarter had some positives in that regard. And also DeAndre Hunter came out swinging 7 points in that first quarter. So that was sort of a continuation of a little bit of what we saw in game one. And I know we're going to talk about him as well. So I'm going to hold my thoughts a little bit on him, but that Zachary Risachet, he had a tall order tonight because Dyson Daniels, and actually we'll talk about him in a second, but Dyson Daniels literally racked up 3 fouls in what seemed like a matter of minutes. Yeah. So that sprung Zachary Risachet into action and having the dubious assignment of guarding LaMelo Ball. And not easy for anyone. Let's just be real. He's going to get his. But I have to say that I did like the fact that Quinn gave him an opportunity there. And also I like the fact that within that space, Quinn also played him at different positions. He played him at the 2, he played him at the 4. And I will say that might be a little bit of why the Hornets were able to go on that 17-6 run in the second quarter that kind of brought the score closer for them to go in. Just the Hawks up just 4 points at halftime. But that's one of the things I liked because you've got to find out what Risachet can do. And when you put him in these pressure situations, how will he react? And I felt like, at least from his demeanor, I liked the way he responded.
I can agree with much of that. And I know one thing, Tenitra, I know that, the season is just now starting and what have you, but at some point we're going to have to get back to, our typical hello, my name is player, because this Trey Man kid who kind of feel like he's kind of come out of nowhere.
I forgot to mention that. That was another one of my takes. What's up with random dude?
Yeah, random dude.
17.
Random role player dude. Yeah.
Yes, random role player. Exactly.
17 points. And he's been playing some really good basketball. And I really feel like, with he's definitely kind of coming off as the really undersized but overly confident dude. I think kind of reminded me of a Devontae Graham, I think it was, who also ironically and coincidentally used to play for Charlotte too, who was a load in terms of scoring. But no, Trey Man has just been looking better and better. And that was one of the concerning things for me is, those guys that were going to be coming off the bench between him, Josh Green, who they just acquired over from Dallas, and even Grant Williams on the defensive side of the ball. So these matchups between Trey being superstar, all-star type caliber player, same thing as LaMelo. And then the defensive guys coming off the bench being Grant Williams and then Onyeka Okongwu. Then you've got your athletes like Jalen Johnson and Miles Bridges, who had 27 tonight. Ironically enough, last time they played Atlanta, I think back in March, also had 27. So I guess maybe just like a contrast of styles, or just styles make fights, as they say in the boxing world.
Yeah, well, I tell you, a contrast in halves as well, because we know that the Dyson Daniels effect, we didn't quite get to see it as much in that first half, but we definitely saw it in the second half. We will discuss on the other side. This episode of our Locked On Hawks postcast is brought to you by PrizePicks, which is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least two players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on PrizePicks. Now think about this. You can win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. And PrizePicks is the best way to get action on sports in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Texas, and right here in Georgia. And it's the only real money daily fantasy platform with an insurance policy. It's an injury insurance policy, so your lineup stays in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, PrizePicks keeps your lineup live, which is such a cool thing. So download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup code. Again, it's LOCKEDONNBA. That's the code. It gets you $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. And of course, after you download PrizePicks. PrizePicks, run your game. So, DeShaun, we absolutely loved what we saw out of Dyson Daniels in game one of the season. And so I know for me, I was excited to see what he was going to do in game two, only to see him go down early with 3 fouls. So that was a tough one. But to tell you how powerful the Dyson effect is, the Dyson Daniels effect is, you literally only had one player, Jalen Johnson, who had a better plus rating when he was on the floor. Tonight, +9 for Dyson Daniels, +9 when he was on the floor. And the impact to me goes even more so than just the 18 points. He only had a rebound, but the 18 points, the 4 assists, the 2 steals, and the 2 blocks. There was just so much hustle, so much energy, and just so much getting after it that I feel like, and it was especially so powerful because you saw what he wasn't able to do and how he had to sit the bench, and he was very limited in what he was able to contribute in the first half. All of a sudden, he comes back in the second half and makes his presence felt. And I just feel like, yes, we already know what the Trae Young effect is, and we're going to talk about that in a second. We know what the Jalen Johnson effect is typically because we saw it last year, and we saw shades of it tonight in the second half. But the Dyson Daniels effect, 2 games in, I'm pretty impressed.
Yeah, for sure. I am too. And this is where I definitely kind of put my foot in my mouth a little bit and got to eat some of my words, if not nothing else than just for the 2 games that we have seen so far. You know, when I see DeJounte Murray on his way out, and again, I'm not saying everything looked like A1 steak sauce when him and Trae was trying to coexist. By far, I'm not being that person. However, for all of the things that I felt like this team needed, and I do definitely think that they clearly addressed this with Dyson Daniels, but it just wasn't the sexy name that me and a lot of other people were really thinking of when we're talking about getting rid of somebody like a DeJounte Murray. However, you go get someone like a Dyson Daniels. I'm not really in love with it. I got to see what it looks like, but just on the surface level, I don't love it.
Yeah.
I think first things first is let's just forget just for 2 seconds about how great he's been on defense and add the fact in that nobody told me this dude was going to look this good offensively. I think that has been like the extra piece, like the extra layer on the onion for Dyson Daniels. Nah, moving that aside and get back to what we know that he's really good at, which is on the defensive side. There's something I learned about this game called basketball in which, you know, there are those guys who are silent killers and those guys who just aren't, and they're going to run their mouth. Sometimes getting killed by the silent killer is worse than it is from the guy who's going to give you 20 and run his mouth versus the guy who can give you 25 and not say a word to you because he doesn't have to. He just lets his game speak. That makes it more frustrating. It works the same way on offense as it does on defense, where if a guy is doing all these great things defensively, everybody's not going to appear to be the defensive stopper and anchor playmaker that a Draymond Green or a Pat Beverly is going to be with every swipe at the ball that they get. They're going to run their mouth. Some guys are just going to go down there, and this makes it feel even worse that they're going to take the ball from you or do so many different things that can impact the game on that side of the ball that is just going to be that much more frustrating. So I like the fact that he's kind of like that in that silent killer mode. Shout out to Dyson. Shout out to Dyson Daniels.
And I don't think he's a silent killer at all. I think he's going to be a little bit more of a vocal guy as time goes on. If I say silent, what I would say more of like surprising, because I don't know that many of us knew much about him before he got here. Let's just be honest. But there were good returns from the guys I know in New Orleans, asking them just, hey, what do you think about him? I think it might be a good look, especially I was thinking about the defensive side of the ball, because my thought was that's where the Hawks have been sorely lacking. So I was excited about that part, but I will agree with you as far as what we're getting from him offensively. Yeah, that's really cool. That is a plus as well. And again, when looking at where he was at halftime, 4 points and 3 personal fouls. He did have a steal and he had 1 assist, and we know where he ended. So the other thing I like is, hey, if you have that rough start, you can actually reset yourself, because one of the things that we talked about a lot last year was sometimes you get in the Hawks' heads, and once you get in their heads, whether you're the referee or whether they feel like it was an unfair foul or just whatever the case is, then the Hawks tap out for the rest of the game. I think Dyson Daniels, in the way that he approached the second half, that's what we want to see from the Hawks more often.
Yeah, and even and I could be totally wrong or maybe off base about this, but I think that there's a little bit of that edge that you can kind of see, like, hey, you don't want to put nothing past this dude. Like something about that Australian aura that he carries with him or something. I don't know what it is, but it just seems like, hey, this dude might be light skinned with curly hair, but I don't know if you're gonna try this brother right here, because like he been through some things, or you know what, he's not, he's not intimidating. That's the thing that I do like sometimes when it comes from some of the international players, because it's not about all the hoopla, it's not about all the fanfare, it's just about getting down and dirty. You're not afraid of a little dirt under your nails or getting your hands dirty a little bit. I kind of like that about his game, and I've been impressed so far. I mean, what I've seen out of him, especially in comparison to my expectations, no question, A+.
Yeah. And Trae Young had himself a game as well, had a double-double, almost a triple-double, 38 points, 10 assists, 8 rebounds, 4 steals. And it's one of those games where when you look in that assist column, he had that crazy record, the 2010 record that was his last year. And I think now he's like right there in that top 10, so to speak. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier, where I really liked the ball movement. I thought the ball movement was really good very early, and I thought that he kind of led the charge with that. And there were some times, especially in that second half, when they needed him to, he got a little grimy. Got on the ground, got the steals, made sure that it was going to be difficult should the Charlotte Hornets try to come back. And Robert, you said Dyson played in the Olympics, I believe helped him on offense. And that could be true. Because when you talk about international ball, it's a whole different ball game out there. I mean, first of all, it certainly appeared to me to be more aggressive when I was watching the Olympics.
Seriously.
Yeah, so you have to be about that. And I think to Robert's point, you also have to be able to score. And yeah, I think he might just be a secret little weapon, a difference maker. I agree with you, Robert, on that.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself, that's for sure.
But yeah, I gotta still, before we wrap this segment, gotta still talk about Trae Young, because that was really a monster game. And one of the things I saw for him as well was he really, really did a great job at going after what I believe were quality threes. So yeah, he was 5 of 14, but those 14 threes for the most part were quality threes. It wasn't him always heaving it up early in the shot clock. I felt like he had a bit of a patience and waiting to get a good shot, if not a better shot, from the 3-point line. So those are some of the good things that we saw tonight. But hey, at the end of the day, there might be this one pesky thing that we saw last season that we don't want to see again, and something we saw tonight that we don't want to see Sunday night. We'll talk about it in Who Got Next. This episode of our Locked On Hawks postcast is brought to you by FanDuel, where you can start the season, if you haven't already started, with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And I say that because, of course, the NFL is going into week 7, but maybe this is your first time trying out FanDuel. Perfect time to start. Think about this. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, because sometimes you kind of know where a game is going to go and how it's going to play out, then you can check out the latest stats view, live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. So you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet at FanDuel.com. Now, there is a big Falcons game come Sunday. Atlanta Falcons versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in Tampa. The Falcons have not dropped a divisional game quite yet this year. They could literally be 4-0 in the division, sitting atop the NFC South. And so if you get a hunch in the middle of that game, that game is going to go in the Falcons' favor, maybe check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets on. Maybe the Falcons. So you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet at FanDuel.com, because FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. So there were things that we saw that we liked tonight. I know we've talked about some of that as well. And this is early returns, guys, 2 games in. But for you, DeShaun, from what you saw with this Hawk squad in just game 2 of the regular season, did anyone maybe show you something that made you feel like you'll see it consistently throughout the season? And the reason we bring that up, we know, again, it's very early, is because that might have been the thing we talked about the most throughout last season, the consistent inconsistency. So did you see anything that maybe gave you some optimism about the Hawks individually or collectively being more consistent?
Yeah. The first thing is the guy that we spent a lot of time talking about already, and for a good reason, deservedly so, being Dyson Daniels. Don't forget that this is only his second time suiting up for the Atlanta Hawks in a meaningful game that actually counts for something. This was not about, okay, well, let me kind of get used to the, shaking the cobwebs out and kind of get used to the way that the system is run and all these different things, being a system player. He's just going out there and doing things that he's just naturally already good at and just God-given. Nobody has to teach him. You either have it or you don't, and he has it. That's hustle points and second chance points and just tough-nosed defense and things like that. So I feel confident that if a guy can show me that he can bring that to the table without worrying about how he's going to fit in and how he's going to get his shots, everything's coming organically for him. So from that standpoint, yes, that. And then something else that I really keep my fingers, toes, eyes, T's, and everything else crossed that I hope continues to carry on for the rest of the season is Trae Young's defense looks like it's kind of still, from based off of last year, kind of picking up where it left off at a little bit. 4 steals tonight, 1 steal away from first time ever in his career going for 5 rebounds, 5 assists, and
5 steals. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I think that is something that I want to see continue to carry on. I think that it can only get better as long as he keeps on putting forth that effort. However, something that I would like to see change is those turnovers. If I'm just being honest, I think Trae had 7 of them tonight. And sometimes it just seems like the, careless or just being careless with the ball or unforced errors or unforced turnovers is something I like to see them cut down on, but it's still early in the season. I think it's more than capable of happening.
Yeah. And I would say the consistency would be, and it wasn't as significant as the bench contributions for the Hornets, but there was some consistency in what the Hawks bench was able to do tonight because everybody scored. Onyeka Okongwu, Zachary Risachet, Beat Creechy, Garrison Matthews, everybody scored, and I thought that was good. And also Okongwu, of course, it wasn't the night he had in game 1, but he still came to the table and brought 8 rebounds, 3 assists, and a steal. So I like what I saw out of him. And I say that to say that second unit is still going to be so critical because we know that they come into the game at some key moments. Obviously, Trae, for example, to give him a breather, Clint Capella to give him a breather as well. So I think it's important to see that consistency because I think we saw it at points last year, but if you can get that and get some return out of them, I think that's going to be a good look. And like King Philip said, it's a great win. As far as I'm concerned, I don't know if I would say it's a great win, but I will say it's a win. So a win is a win is a win. Exactly. That hygienist, I'm more with that hygienist because that person said www. www. And I'm the same way. Look, it's a dub, it's a dub, it's a dub. And that's all that it needs to be for now as this team is still figuring itself out. Now, that said, what I do not want to see, especially against a team like the Oklahoma City Thunder that literally play at the top. They play such a great brand of basketball that most are picking them to come out of the West for the NBA Finals this year. So that's a big test early in the season. But what I want to see is them step up and, like you said, play a clean game of basketball. We don't need to see all those turnovers because that team's going to do a much better job of taking advantage of points off turnovers. The other thing you don't want to see, because, I mean, points conceded, only 18. That's not really a big deal. But don't think that if you turn that ball over 14 times that the Thunder won't take advantage of that. So I agree with you. I think they've got to clean it up in that regard. I think as well, what we have to see is on the offensive side of the boards. Like we saw it pretty even in game 1, but game 2 tonight, all of those second chance opportunities that you gave Charlotte, that's another part of why they stayed in the game, because at the end of the day, they were cleaning up on the boards and giving themselves opportunities to keep scoring against you. So yeah, gotta make sure that you are right there, hungry to get the ball and making sure that it's just one possession, that it's not an extended possession, and that possession arrow goes right back down the court and you take up your 24 seconds to be able to get what you need out of your possession as well.
Well, first, let's not assume that this is going to be the exact same thing or that the OKC Thunder didn't learn anything from that last preseason game when they played. And I get it. It was just preseason. Of course it was. But let's not forget that, this is the number one defensive team in the league on last year. Dort is going to come with it defensively. Williams is going to come with it defensively and offensively. Shea is a pretty good defender. We don't even need to talk about his offense. Rim protection with Chet on the inside, for crying out loud. So the Hawks definitely are going to have their hands full, no question, on both sides of the ball. Control what you can control. I think that's just the main thing when it comes down to the Hawks. Play with some confidence, play like you belong, and go out there and be energetic. I get it. It's a road game. It's going to be tough. This ain't going to be the first tough game that they're going to play, but make it tough on them. Be that underdog. When you play that underdog role, and I've always been taught this at a very young age, Tenitra, when you're the one who really don't have a lot to lose, and everybody, all the pressure is on the other person or on the other guy or other team or what have you, you can afford to take some calculated risk. And that's a very just dangerous person. That's a very dangerous team right there. Whenever somebody just really doesn't have a lot to lose, that can always propose some challenges and some threats for the opposition. So we'll have to wait and see for at least about 48 hours from now.
Yeah, and Trae Young usually plays quite well when he is back home. He just needs the rest of the squad to follow suit. Locked On Sports Atlanta is the number one place to hang out after every game. Remember to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And for more on the Hawks, check out Locked On Hawks with our guy, Brad Rowland. We'll see you next time.